I never truly understood the power of silence until I met her. Before she came into our lives, my world was simple. It was my father and me, alone in the house I grew up in, surrounded by memories of my mother, who had passed when I was just a child. The house had always felt like home, safe, quiet, and a place where I could just be. But when she entered, it felt like everything began to crack. It started with the small things, the subtle changes that made me uneasy. My father was distracted more often, his attention drifting away from me and toward her. The way she walked into the room with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. How she always seemed to know the right words to say to him. How her presence filled every space. Slowly, she took up more room in the house until one day, it felt like there was no room left for me. But it wasn't just her presence that unnerved me. It was the silence. Her silence. It was the way she could go entire days without saying a word, but still manage to make everyone around her feel like they were being judged. She didn't need to raise her voice or start arguments. Her silence was more dangerous than any words. It was the kind of silence that made you second-guess everything you did. The kind that made you feel like you were walking on eggshells, always trying to predict her next move. And most of the time, you couldn't. It was a power play. A subtle, insidious weapon. I remember one particular evening, sitting at the dinner table, the three of us together. The room heavy with that same silence. My father was trying to make small talk, asking me about school, about my day. But I could tell he wasn't really listening. She sat at the end of the table, her eyes fixed on her plate, not bothering to engage. But I could feel her gaze on me, cold and calculating. Every time I spoke, her eyes would flicker to me, but her lips never moved. She didn't need to say a word for me to know exactly what she was thinking. It was the first time I realized how dangerous that silence could be. How she used it to manipulate. How she made everything feel off. Like I was the one in the wrong for wanting to exist in the same space. I couldn't win. If I spoke, she would respond with her usual cold smile and silence. If I stayed quiet, she would make me feel like I had something to apologize for. I hated her for it. I hated the way she made me feel invisible. Like I was nothing more than a nuisance in my own home. One night, I had finally had enough. I was tired of trying to get my father's attention. Tired of feeling like I was just a ghost in my own life. She was never going to let me win, never going to let me be heard. So, I decided to confront it. I decided to confront her. I waited until my father had gone to bed, leaving just the two of us alone in the living room. The house was still, the silence thick between us. I stood in the doorway, watching her as she stared at the blank television screen. Not even bothering to turn it on. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice trembling slightly, but I didn't back down. She didn't even look up. Her gaze stayed fixed on the screen. Her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure you do," she said, her voice soft, smooth, and so empty. It was almost as if she was humoring me. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, taking a step forward, my hands clenched at my sides. "You're not going to control this house. You're not going to push me out like you did before." The words hung in the air, and I expected some kind of reaction, anger, deflection, anything. But she didn't move. She didn't say anything. The silence, thick and suffocating, filled the space between us. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the tension almost unbearable. Finally, she spoke, but it wasn't the words I expected. "You're wasting your time," she said, her voice like ice. This house, this family, they don't need you. Her words stung more than any slap. I could feel my breath catch in my throat, but I stood my ground. You don't get to decide that, I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. This is my home. My family. And no matter how hard you try, you can't erase me. She looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. It wasn't regret. It wasn't guilt. It was something darker, something that made my blood run cold. The silence that followed was oppressive, almost suffocating. You'll never belong here, she said, her voice low, barely a whisper, but it was enough. Not while I'm here. Not while I hold all the power. That was it, the final blow. Her silence was her weapon, and she wielded it like a sword, cutting through everything I had ever known. She didn't need to fight me. She didn't need to argue with me. She just needed to make me feel like I didn't matter. And she succeeded. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I couldn't look at her, not without feeling like I was losing. I turned and left, walking out into the night, the weight of her words still hanging in the air like a poison that I couldn't shake off. But as I walked, I realized something that had been growing inside me for a long time. Her silence, her weapon, was only powerful because I let it be. I had allowed her to control my space, my family, and my own sense of worth. But I didn't need her permission to exist. I didn't need her to validate me. I was done being controlled, done being silenced. And I was going to make sure she knew it. The house had always been a sanctuary for me. A place of familiarity where I could retreat and feel safe. But when she walked in, everything changed. Her quiet presence seeped into every corner, every room, turning the place I had once called home into something alien. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. That I was just adjusting to a new dynamic, that maybe I was just being too sensitive. But over time, it became clear that she wasn't just a part of the house, she was slowly taking over it. What bothered me the most wasn't the way she rearranged the furniture or how she started cooking meals the way she wanted them, not the way we used to. It was her silence. The way she didn't speak unless it was necessary, the way she communicated without words. As if she didn't need to, as if the air around her would bend to her will just by her presence. I began to notice how her silence shifted the entire mood of the house. My father, who had once been so vibrant, so present, became quieter too, almost passive. There were fewer conversations at the dinner table, fewer shared laughs. Instead, there was an uncomfortable stillness between us. At first, I couldn't pinpoint the feeling of dread that grew inside me every time I entered the house, but it was there. It wrapped itself around me, slowly tightening, until I felt like I was trapped in the same space, suffocated by the silence she had created. It wasn't that she was mean or outright cruel. It was the subtlety of her power. Her silence spoke volumes. She didn't need to yell or throw a fit. She didn't need to tell me I didn't belong. Her quiet indifference said it all. It was as if I was invisible, or worse, irrelevant. I started to resent her for it, for how easily she had slipped into our lives and made herself the center, without ever saying a word. The way she took my place, without effort or acknowledgement. One night, after dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. The silence had become unbearable. I couldn't sit there pretending everything was fine while she barely acknowledged me. I had to say something, do something. Why don't you ever speak to me? I asked, my voice rising despite myself, my frustration leaking out in that single question. She didn't flinch. She didn't react at all, actually. She just kept cutting her food, her focus on the plate in front of her. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I didn't stop. I don't know what game you're playing, but you're not going to win, I said. My voice sharper now, the words coming faster. You think you can just come into my life, into my father's life, and replace everything without even trying? Without saying a word? You don't even have to try, do you? Because your silence is enough to get what you want. Finally, she looked up, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her eyes met mine. Her gaze was calm, calculating. It didn't hold anger. It didn't hold anything, really. But there was something in the way she looked at me that made my heart skip a beat. You don't understand, she said, her voice quiet, but carrying a weight that felt heavier than any loud argument. I don't need to say anything. You already know everything. I stared at her, confused. What did she mean? What was she trying to say? Her eyes didn't leave mine. And then, with a cold, almost imperceptible smile, she added, It's not about what I say. It's about what you don't. And then she returned her attention to her food as if the conversation had never happened. The room felt colder, emptier, as though she had already won. Already managed to twist the silence into something that left me questioning myself. It wasn't just the house anymore. It wasn't just her presence. It was me. I wasn't sure when it happened, but it was clear, her silence had become a weapon. And I was the one who had been defeated by it, not by anything she had done to me, but by the absence of anything at all. For weeks, I lived with that nagging feeling of helplessness. The weight of silence suffocating me at every turn. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't let it continue. But the more I tried to fight it, the more her silence consumed me. Like it was a reflection of something deep inside me that I wasn't ready to confront. Then, one night, I realized that silence was no longer enough. I wasn't the same person I had been when she first arrived. She may have claimed the house, but she couldn't claim my voice. The next time I found myself at the table with her, when she slipped into her quiet, calculating silence, I took a deep breath. I'm done being silent too, I said, my voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with every word. You don't get to control this family with your silence anymore. I'm done. I wasn't sure if I was ready to fight her, or if I was just finally tired of being silent. But for the first time, I said something. I broke the hold she had on me. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. But for the first time, I knew, her silence was no longer my burden to bear. I expected something to shift after that night. A confrontation, a reaction from her. But there was nothing, just the same silence. It was almost as if I hadn't said anything at all. As if my words had dissolved into the air without leaving a trace. But I realized something that night, her silence wasn't just about controlling me. It was about controlling everyone. It was a force that made even the loudest voices quiet. The most resolute minds second-guessed themselves. But I couldn't keep walking on eggshells anymore. The next few days passed in a haze, and I tried to keep myself busy. I threw myself into my work, filled my evenings with books and walks, avoiding the house whenever I could. I needed space. I needed time away from the silence that hung like a heavy fog. It was a Saturday when I finally returned. I walked through the door of the house, expecting the usual tension to hit me, but instead, there was nothing. She was in the living room, sitting in her usual chair, reading a book. My father was nowhere to be seen. Probably out running errands or doing something that kept him out of the house. I hesitated for a moment in the doorway, but then I walked in, determined. The silence wasn't going to control me any longer. I would speak. I would make my voice heard. I sat down across from her, not waiting for her to acknowledge me. Not giving her the power to remain in her indifference. You know, I began, my voice steady but full of intent. I don't think I've ever told you how I really feel about all of this. She didn't look up from her book. Her fingers lightly grazed the edges of the pages, but her attention was clearly elsewhere. Her indifference stung, but I wasn't backing down. This had gone on long enough. You've been here for months now, and you've changed everything. I thought you were supposed to be a part of this family, but every time I look at you, I realize you've made it clear that I'm not. You've made sure that I'm not welcome in my own home. And the worst part is, you've done it without saying a word. Finally, she closed the book slowly and set it on the table. The click of the cover closing felt loud in the otherwise silent room. She looked at me, her eyes cool, calculating. Is that what you think? She asked, her voice soft but chilling. That I don't want you here? I clenched my jaw, not letting her tone make me back down. You've made it clear. You've never once tried to make me feel like I'm still a part of this. Your silence says it all. It's not that you can't say anything, it's that you choose not to. She leaned back in her chair, eyes still on me, but now with a slight, almost imperceptible smile playing at the edges of her lips. You think silence is power? She asked, her voice low and almost amused. It's not about thinking it's power, I shot back. It's about the fact that you've made this house feel like it's yours. Like you decide everything. And that's the thing, I'm not letting you do it anymore. Her eyes finally flickered with something. Not anger. Not even frustration. Just a soft kind of amusement. You're so sure of that, aren't you? She said softly, almost to herself. She paused for a moment, and for a brief second, there was something almost sad in her gaze. But it disappeared just as quickly. You don't understand, she said quietly, almost with a hint of melancholy. I never wanted to take anything from you. I've never wanted to hurt you. I almost felt a pang of doubt, but I pushed it away. Her words didn't change the reality of what I had been living. The years of silence, the years of being ignored and overshadowed by her presence. She had made it clear from the beginning that I was not welcome in the space I had once called my own. No, I said, shaking my head, you didn't want to hurt me. But you did. You took everything without a fight. Without saying a word. And I let you. The words felt like they had been building inside me for so long. A pressure I couldn't hold back anymore. I had spent so long hiding from this truth, but now it was out in the open. And I could feel something inside me begin to shift. Her expression softened, but it wasn't the sympathy I had expected. It was resignation. She stood up, slowly, and crossed the room, her movements almost calculated. Like she was trying to measure the distance between us. You think you've won, don't you? She asked, her voice soft and almost regretful. I stood my ground. I'm not trying to win, I said firmly. I'm just trying to stop losing. Her gaze hardened for just a moment, and for a split second, I saw something flash in her eyes. Something sharp, something like acknowledgement. But it was fleeting, and she quickly masked it with that same, empty smile. You'll never understand, will you? She said, her voice almost apologetic, but distant. It's never been about you, not in the way you think. You think my silence is meant to hurt you. But it's not. It's meant to protect you. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. What was she saying? What did she mean by that? But before I could ask, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the hallway. I stood there in the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. Her silence wasn't just a weapon. It was something else, something darker, more complicated than I had ever realized. I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear now: she didn't control me. Not anymore. I had finally found my voice. And I wasn't going to let her take it away again. The silence in the house had always been oppressive. But it wasn't until she arrived that I realized how suffocating it could be. Her quiet was like a shadow, dark and pervasive, always hanging around. Always filling the spaces between words. It wasn't that she was deliberately cruel or loud, she was the opposite. She was calm, composed, and silent. But that silence? That was her weapon. I had lived in this house for years, and it had always been a place of comfort. A place where I could breathe. But when she entered, it was as if the air itself became heavier. Every time I walked into a room, there she was, sitting quietly. Looking as though she were waiting for something, waiting for me to make a mistake. Waiting for me to slip up. The quiet in the room became louder. As if she were speaking to me without speaking at all. And that, I realized, was her power. Her silence made me feel smaller, invisible, as though my presence didn't even matter. She didn't need to raise her voice to make her point. The way she didn't speak was enough. I tried everything to break the silence. At first, I attempted small talk, casual questions about her day or our plans. She would respond with just enough politeness to keep the conversation from dying. But I could see the walls she put up with every word I said. And when the conversation lagged, when it drifted into an uncomfortable lull, she would fill it with that same silence. It wasn't just in casual conversation either. At dinner, I would try to talk to my father, ask him how his day had gone. Or tell him about mine, but more often than not, his attention was diverted. She was the center of his world now. And as I watched him look at her with that familiar, distant gaze, I realized that she had already won. She had become the focal point of everything. And in that focus, I was lost. It was like I wasn't even there. It wasn't until one evening, when my father had gone to bed early, that I decided I'd had enough. I couldn't live in this house with this hollow air between us. With her controlling the space with nothing but her silence. I found her sitting on the couch, reading a book, as she always did in the evenings. The lights were dim, the only sounds the rustle of pages turning. But this time, I didn't let it stay quiet. "I need to talk to you," I said, standing in the doorway. My voice firm despite the way my heart was pounding in my chest. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge me at first. Her fingers kept moving across the pages, deliberate and slow. For a moment, I thought she might ignore me entirely. But then, slowly, she set the book down and looked up at me. Her expression was calm, unreadable, but I could feel the tension in her eyes. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked, her voice a low, controlled murmur. I walked into the room, crossing the space between us with purpose. I wasn't afraid of her silence anymore. "I can't keep doing this," I said, my voice shaking, not from fear, but from something deeper. Something I had been holding on to for far too long. "I can't keep pretending like everything is fine when you never speak to me. When you make me feel like I don't even belong here. Your silence, it's not just quiet. It's suffocating." She didn't move, didn't speak, but I could see the way her jaw tightened. She knew exactly what I meant. And still, she didn't respond. "You think that because you don't say anything, you're winning. But all you're doing is pushing me away. Pushing my father away. And it's destroying everything. I don't know if you realize it. But your silence is louder than any argument. And I can't stand it anymore." The words spilled out of me, faster than I could catch them. The frustration of months of living in this quiet war pouring out in a rush. And for the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Something that wasn't calm. Something that almost looked guilty. She sat back in the chair, not answering immediately. The silence in the room stretched between us, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer now, but still cold. "I didn't want this," she said, her tone almost apologetic. But there was no real emotion behind it. "I didn't want to push you out, to make you feel unwanted. But your father and we've been trying to figure out how to make things work. And in doing that, I've just forgotten how to make space for you. I never meant to make you feel invisible." The words hung in the air, and I couldn't decide if they were sincere or just another form of manipulation. But something inside me told me I didn't care anymore. It didn't matter. The damage had been done. The silence had taken root too deeply for it to be fixed by a few words. "I don't want your apology," I said, my voice firm, no longer trembling with uncertainty. "I want my life back. I want my family back. And I don't care what it takes, but I'm not going to let you continue controlling this house with your silence." Her gaze softened, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The conversation was over. I turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, not looking back. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of freedom. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need my father's approval. All I needed was to reclaim my own voice. I wasn't going to let her silence control me anymore. The days that followed felt like I was finally breathing after being submerged underwater for too long. I had confronted her, spoken the words that had been choking me for months. And I could feel the weight of the silence lifting, even if only a little bit. It wasn't just about the house anymore, it was about me. About finding my place again, in my own life, in my own family. But even as I felt lighter, a part of me wondered if things would ever truly change. Would she really start talking? Would my father even notice? Or would he stay as distant as he always had been? Too caught up in his own world to realize how much I had been suffering. I didn't have the answers, and for the first time, I didn't need them. I had started to realize that the only person I could change was myself. The only way forward was to stop letting her, or anyone, dictate my life. I spent the next week in a kind of quiet resolution. I didn't go back to the house immediately. I didn't want to fall into the same pattern of expecting something to be fixed, of waiting for change to come to me. Instead, I kept myself busy. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, started taking evening walks again. And even signed up for a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try but had never found the time for. Little by little, I was rebuilding the pieces of myself that had been hidden, suppressed under the weight of everything she had done to make me feel small. Then one evening, a message arrived. It was from my father. The message was brief, but the words carried a weight I hadn't expected. "Can we meet? I think it's time we talked." At first, I hesitated. I had spent so long pushing him away. And after everything that had happened, I didn't know if I was ready to open that door again. But then I realized that it wasn't about fixing the past. It was about moving forward. About seeing what kind of relationship we could have, if any, in the future. I agreed to meet him at a small park near my apartment. It wasn't much, but it felt like the right place. When I arrived, I saw him sitting on a bench, looking older than I remembered. But still the same man. His eyes were tired, filled with something I couldn't quite place. but there was a sincerity in them that I hadn't seen in a long time. We didn't speak right away. We just sat there for a while, the weight of years between us. Finally, he turned to me, his voice soft but clear. "I don't know where to start," he said. I guess I just want you to know how sorry I am for everything. For not being there for you, for letting things happen the way they did. For letting her come between us." His words hit me like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. I had spent so much time angry, blaming him for everything that had gone wrong, but now, hearing him say it so plainly, I realized how much pain he was carrying. How much guilt had been eating away at him. "I'm sorry too," I said, my voice catching slightly. "For letting it go on for so long. For letting her make me feel like I didn't belong here." He nodded, his expression filled with regret. "I failed you. I failed both of you." I swallowed, trying to steady my breath. "It's not about who failed who," I said, looking at him directly. "It's about what happens now. We can't change the past. We can't undo what happened. But we can decide what kind of future we want." There was a long pause, and I could see the gears turning in his head. He didn't seem to know what to say, but I could tell that he was trying to understand. Trying to make sense of everything we had been through, of everything that had been broken. "I know you're not the same person you were," I continued, my voice more certain now. "But I'm not the same either. I've been holding on to the past for so long that it was suffocating me, but I've let it go. I can't keep living in the past, Dad." He reached out, his hand hovering between us, unsure. "You don't have to forgive me, Hazel. You don't have to forget anything. I just want a chance to make it right, if that's even possible." I looked at his hand, and for a moment, I felt a shift in my chest. The anger I had been holding onto, the hurt, it was still there, but it didn't feel as heavy. Maybe, just maybe, I could forgive him. But more importantly, I realized that forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. It was for my peace. "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said quietly, looking at him. "I'm just asking you to be there. And to try. We both need to try." He nodded, his hand falling to his lap. There was a softness to his eyes now. And I could see that he was finally ready to accept the truth. That the past couldn't be changed, but the future was still open. We didn't talk much longer, but it wasn't necessary. The conversation had already been had. The forgiveness, the understanding, it was already there. Unfolding between us like a new chapter. As I walked away from the park, I felt the weight lift. I wasn't going back to the house. I wasn't going back to the past. But I had finally let go of the anger, the bitterness. I had found peace, not with her, but with myself. And I knew, in that moment, that nothing could hold me back anymore. Not silence. Not guilt. Not regret. I was free. And that was all I needed.